Well, we're excited about Jason Thacker, and you have read his bio, so I won't reiterate it all in detail. But Jason really is been given by the Lord some tremendous insight around the theme of AI. He's a professor at Boyce College. Many of you be familiar with that. Received some degrees from Southern Seminary and is working on a PhD. He's the editor of a number of distinguished journals, written articles, a variety of books around this subject matter. And most importantly, he's married and has some children and desires to serve the Lord in a great way. So I know you've seen his bio. I don't want to take time away from Jason because we want to hear everything the Lord has put on his heart for this day and this morning together. So, Jason, thank you so much for being a part of this. Excited to hear what the Lord has put on your heart, and we turn it over to you now. Thanks again.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate the invite, and I especially want to point out Amber Dodgett, who's been so helpful getting everything organized and making this a really easy event for me to be able to be part of. And it's not lost on me that we're doing an event via technology on one of the emerging technologies of our day. And I think that should be quite instructive for us as we think about the nature of these tools, how they're forming and shaping us as people. And I think that for some of us, that seems like quite an audacious claim to say that these tools are shaping us. Don't we just use them? We'll talk a little bit about that this morning, this afternoon as well, as we talk about the nature of artificial intelligence, how it's forming and shaping us as people. And I think the really kind of daunting but very critical question that we have to ask, which I believe is that question that really permeates so many of the cultural conversations, social, political conversations we're having today, of what does it mean to be human? I think if we can nail that question, which our faith, the scriptures give us a very clear indication on what it means to be human, that actually will shape our approach to things like artificial intelligence, where you see these machines doing what we once thought was reserved for humanity. And so thinking through some of those realities, what does it mean to be human? And also that will affect naturally how we think about these tools and technologies. I'm excited to kind of talk about this because it's not only a critical, but often pretty daunting question. Some of us, typically we fall into one of two camps. Some of us are really excited about AI. We are excited about the future, the ways that this can be used, the way the Lord might be able to use this for the furtherance of his kingdom to spread the gospel to the ends of the earth. And we're excited about that, leveraging the technologies of our day for gospel proclamation. And that is a good thing. But many of us are also quite fearful. We don't like technology, maybe in general. Maybe we're already uncomfortable with things like Zoom and kind of the Zoom apocalypse that we've had over the last few years, where we're utilizing technology at such a high rate. But we're also quite scared. We're maybe a little fearful, a little bit kind of overwhelmed by the nature of artificial intelligence and how powerful these tools are, as well as a lot of the kind of wall-to-wall media coverage we have. You can go to any major news website right now, and above the fold, typically there is at least one, maybe two or three stories about how artificial intelligence is changing everything. It's revolutionizing the nature of work, ministry, preaching, teaching. It's changing everything about our society, and it feels like everything's changing, but we're not quite prepared. We're not quite ready for it. What I want us to do as Christians today is to slow down a little bit and to think about the nature of technology. It's not all good with maybe a little bit of bad uses mixed in. It's not all bad with a little bit of good uses mixed in, but it's also not neutral. These things are shaping us. They're forming us in particular ways. Often in the church, we've kind of seen ebbs and flows of this, but it kind of reminds me of the old Silicon Valley mantra to move fast and break things. Meaning, let's just adopt all of the innovations, all of the tools of the day, and we'll kind of figure it out as we go. We'll build the plane as we're flying it. In an age of speed and efficiency that's been kind of exacerbated in many ways by technological innovation, things like artificial intelligence, part of cultivating wisdom and cultivating a distinctly Christian understanding of life, all of life, is to slow down and ask some of the hard questions. Is technology just merely a tool we use? Or might it actually be a tool that's using us? It's shaping us, it's forming us. It always reminds me of Romans 12:2, where Paul tells us, he says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Paul isn't saying if you're being conformed to the patterns of this world. He's assuming you are. So the question is for us is not, are we being conformed to the patterns of this world, but how so? What is discipling us? What is shaping us? And I'll put forth, I think, one of the primary ways that we as the church are being discipled today, that our worldview, our understanding of all of life is being shaped, is mediated through these technologies, whether it's the smartphone that never leaves our side, or whether it's some of the new kind of exciting but often pretty daunting kind of innovations like artificial intelligence. AI is everywhere. As I said, it's wall-to-wall media coverage. Everyone seems to be talking about it. And for a lot of us, we think this is kind of a new problem or a new question. What I want to encourage you is to know that these things, these questions that are being asked, one, the questions themselves aren't all that new. They're actually some of the age-old questions we've always asked as humanity, but we're asking them in light of new opportunities, new challenges, expanding moral horizons of what can be possible. But at the core, we're asking same foundational questions, one of them which is, what does it mean to be human? What is the nature of justice? What is the nature of good? What is the nature of truth? How do we navigate these realities in light of some of the new opportunities and also the challenges before us? But some of the other questions that often many people talk about with artificial intelligence is we just assume these are all novel and new type of things. You know, the November of 2020, 2022, that is, when OpenAI released ChatGPT to the public, this is AI and it's finally here. Well, the reality is we're all already utilizing AI technologies, whether we realize it or not, and have been for many, many, many years. From the social media algorithms that control and shape the things that we see at the top of our news feeds, to our communication platforms, our banking platforms, our national defense, economics, Wall Street, all sorts of aspects, we're already utilizing artificial intelligence, whether we realize it or not. But often we haven't really taken time to slow down and to say, what are we actually talking about here? So much of kind of the AI apocalypse is built on a particular understanding or particular vision of where we're heading with artificial intelligence, what it's all about. And what I want us to do for just a few minutes this morning, this afternoon, is to slow down and to start to think, what's actually going on here? What is artificial intelligence? So let's start with some of the foundational concepts. And then throughout this event, kind of building upon that and starting to think, how do we cultivate wisdom and virtue for the good life, so that we might love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul and our strength, as we read in Matthew 22, but also love our neighbor as ourself. How do we do that? How do we live in light of those truths to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves in light of AI? I think one of the things we can do is to slow down and define what we're talking about. Because when I say something like artificial intelligence, some of us think about the Chat GPT or Google Gemini or Bing Copilot or something like that. Others of us think about our social media feeds or our Nest thermostat, and some of us think of red-eyed killer robots going to take over society. What are we talking about when we say the word artificial intelligence? AI, simply put, is the ability of a machine to perform a human-like task. This doesn't mean that all computer technology is algorithmic or is artificially intelligent. But what we are saying is this is a specific type of machine that can do a human-like process, whether it's processing vast amounts of data, making certain decisions based on a number of kind of inputs, this non-biological intelligence. It could be processing data, making decisions based on that data input, simulating various, and the keyword simulating various human behaviors, such as communication, decision making, and to some level, even some type of, you could say, it seems creative. Is that actually creativity or not? That's a big debated question even within philosophical conversation, including writing, art, video, audio, all the ways that we're starting to see AI kind of revolutionize society. It isn't just about automating certain kind of monotonous tasks or kind of blue collar work as once predicted, but also it's a lot, it seems, that ideas of thinking and writing and producing and creating, we're starting to see AI influence those aspects as well. And again, it feels like things are moving at a breakneck speed, but sometimes we're not prepared. We haven't really thought about what's going on. This morning and this afternoon, I want to talk very briefly to kind of define a little bit of the field for us so we can understand what's actually going on. Within the field of AI, within the study of AI, especially the philosophy and ethics of AI, there's what's known as, there's kind of three different types of AI, two of which I don't actually think are possible to create, but there's a lot of people dreaming about what might be possible. One is the first, and it's kind of the base below. It's called narrow AI. Narrow in the sense it's narrowly focused. This makes a lot of sense. You think of a Nest thermostat. Maybe you have one in your home right now. or in your office. It can change the temperature in your home based on various factors. It starts to learn over time that I really like it cold at night than when in the morning we want it to heat up. But it's not based on a schedule. It's based on it, quote, thinking. And I put that in quotes on purpose. It's making decisions based on certain types of input. Or you think of a narrow focus of a social media algorithm. Many of us, I hope this isn't news to any of you, but your social media feeds are not just a chronological listing of whatever your friends or people you follow are sharing. Things are algorithmically ordered and ranked at the very top that are getting more engagement, that it thinks it will keep you on the platform longer. Why? The longer you're on the platform, the more attention you give to the system, the more advertisements you see, the more money that's made. These freemium services actually aren't all that free. You're just paying for them with your attention and with your data. But you see these kind of narrow aspects of applications of AI. You think of a chat GPT model, the latest model can do text really well, but they have a different model that does Gen AI in the sense of audio or video or images. They're different systems. They're narrowly focused. Now, these systems are getting more and more advanced every single day, and they're mimicking and they're imitating various human behaviors. And that's causing a little bit of panic and a little bit of alarm, not just in the wider society, but even within the church itself. And I think a lot of that is built on what I believe is a faulty understanding of what does it mean to be human. When we recover a biblical vision of what it means to be human, we'll realize that our value and our dignity and worth isn't based on the things we do, but it's actually based in who we are. In the sense we are image bearers of the Almighty God. It's not about the things we do that give us value and dignity and worth. It's about who we are as image bearers. So you have this idea of a narrow form of artificial intelligence. That's the only form of AI that's ever been created, and many, including myself, think that we will be able to create. But what about a human-like intelligence? This is what's known as broad AI or general AI, AGI, general intelligence. This is a human-like intelligence. The idea behind it is that we can create something like human-level intelligence, not just imitating or mimicking human-like intelligence, but actually being like a human being, or maybe even better, in the sense that we can create like God creates. You see kind of the hubris built into that we can create like God creates. We can take what he has given and create something like us. I think there's a lot of themes that we can kind of pull out from scriptural themes in terms of the theme of idolatry that we see throughout the scriptures, especially in places like Isaiah 40, where the craftsman actually takes some of the wood, he uses it, he kindles, he makes a fire for himself, he cooks food, but he takes the other half of the wood, carves an idol, and bows down and says, "Oh my God, rescue me." You see kind of the foolishness in that. But the idea that we can create something with what is before us, with our own hands, that is, quote, better than us or like us in that sense. This is that idea of broad or general intelligence, the human-like intelligence. I always like to use this illustration. I have two boys at home. We have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, Hollis and Porter. And both of my boys are more advanced than the most advanced AI system that's ever been created. Now, I don't have to, maybe I have some budding geniuses on my hands, but I can guarantee you, even at 5 years old, they are outperforming some of the most advanced AI systems that have ever been created, generally speaking. Now, I get outpaced, maybe you get outpaced by a specific AI system, narrowly defined. But in terms of general level intelligence, something a broad level of intelligence, even my children are more advanced than that. Why? Because they're human. There's something distinct. There's something unique about them that set them apart by God's grace to make them a human-like intelligence. Lastly, and one of the things I don't like to spend a lot of time on this one because it's very much a sci-fi dream. Much of the Hollywood plots of thrillers about where we're heading in society is when what happens if the robots all wake up. That idea is what's known as not only general intelligence, the point of singularity, the kind of point of no return, but also what's known as super intelligence or artificial super intelligence, the ability of us to create not just something like us, but something better than us, bigger than us, something like a God almost. You see some of the illusions that we're starting to see, Exodus 32, Isaiah 40, other places. This ability that we have, this hubris in many ways, to create something not just like us, but even bigger and better than us, that we can bow down, we can worship, that is smarter, that transcends us in that ways. I say all this to say is with narrowed broad, and then with super intelligence. Something that I think is quite striking, especially for those in ministry, those leading the people of God, is to remind them of a couple things. One, our value and our dignity and worth as human beings isn't based on the things we do. It's not based on having the highest intellect or creative capacities, relational capacities, or whatever. It's actually rooted in the sense of who we are as image bearers of the Almighty God. From the womb all the way until the very last breath that we take, our worth is not dependent on the things we do or contribute, but based on who we are as image bearers of the Almighty God. That's one truth we can remind. But also, one of the things that one of those kind of cultural, kind of apologetical questions that I think is quite interesting is that many throughout our nation, many throughout our society, many in our churches even, are wondering and thinking about the future of AI and where we're heading. I think some of this desire to create something like us, or create something even bigger and better than us, like a God, actually is revealing of something we see in Romans 1 and 2, that God, that we have been created in a particular way by God, knowing that there is a God, that his attributes, Paul tells us, have been clearly perceived since the beginning of the universe, but we suppress that truth and unrighteousness. Many reformers, many theologians, church historians throughout time have said something, that we have this sense of the divine, the fancy Latin phrase of the sensus divinitatis, the sense of the divine, that we know there's a God, even if we suppress that truth, but his attributes have been clearly perceived, that we try to idolize. We all worship something. We all worship someone. Often in our age, it's ourselves. But this idea that we can create something by ourselves, this hubris, but to create something that's bigger and better, and something that we should bow down and worship, because we are inherently worshiping creatures by God's design. So just kind of thinking about some of those impulses, some of those questions, to realize that's an opportunity for us to not only tell a better story, which is the whole point. You know, there's a very helpful book called by Joshua Shatro called Telling a Better Story, about cultural apologetics. But specifically in the AI conversation, a lot of these conversations I think are quite revealing about some of the design, some of the desires, some of the visions that we have, and why we think we can create. Why are we given these abilities? Also, what is their purpose? What are they for? I think one of the most ironic things in this age of AI that we live in, this age of artificial intelligence, is that we often seek to humanize our machines and dehumanize ourselves in the process. Meaning that we seek to humanize our machines. We ask questions of, what if they wake up? What if they're conscious? What if they're aware? What if they're thinking? What if they're truly intelligent? Can we do this? What about this? What's going to happen? Where are we heading? All of these type of humanizing type of questions. When we ask those type of questions, ironically, we're actually dehumanizing ourselves. We're saying that we're nothing but the sum of our parts, that we're nothing but a material reality, because we look at this object in front of us and think that we can we can create life. But if life can be created just by the material realities, then there may be no need for God. Maybe there's nothing set apart, unique about us. Maybe we're just the sum of our parts. Maybe we're just an organic machine, as many philosophers have said before, that we're just our bodies. That's really all we are. Well, a Christian vision says no. When we are asking these type of questions, it's hubris, it's pride, it's arrogance in the sense of what we think we can create. But also we're dehumanizing ourselves, saying that we're nothing but the product of our parts, the sum of our parts, that AI is something like us in that sense. But God has reminded us time and time again throughout the scripture, from Genesis 1 and 2 all the way to the very end, there's something distinct and set apart about humanity, which we often talk about in the Christian tradition as the image of God. Genesis 1:26-28, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Male and female, he created them. That we were made, we were set apart, not because we're so special. There's a German philosopher named Helmut Thielicke who says that we're not loved because we're so valuable, something unique and special about us. He says that we are valuable because God loves us. That is what sets us apart, is how God has made us and created us and set us apart, not just based on our capacities, our attributes, the things we do. Even within the Christian tradition, we often talk about human dignity, value, and worth based on what we do, whether it's our rational capacities, the things we do, the thinking, the intelligent behaviors, use of language, all of these type of things, or even relational capacities in the sense we can have a relationship with God and with others. That's what makes us human. We have consciousness, awareness, all of these type of attributes and capacities. But what I want to do is when you go back to the scripture, when you start to see what God says about humanity, again, it's not based on what you do. Because if using that logic, using that metric to say that's what makes a human being, what happens when a human being doesn't have those attributes to the same degree? What about those who suffer significant cognitive or physical disabilities? What about the preborn in the womb who are, that is a person, a child of God, a human being themselves, but in that sense, they don't speak, they don't have relational capacities, or they have capacities, but not actually the attributes being manifested. What's going on there? Or what about my 94-year-old grandmother when she was lying on her deathbed, who wasn't, quote, contributing anything? She wasn't speaking, she wasn't engaging. Is her life less valuable because of that? No, because it isn't the mere presence of these attributes, these capacities, these things we do, our contributions that make us human. It's that we're a human who do these things. The image of God is manifested in that sense. So when we start to have a more baseline kind of foundational, what I believe a biblical understanding of humanity, this is naturally going to shape not only how we think about things like artificial intelligence, but also how we develop and utilize them inside and outside the church, a robust ethic of human dignity. The bottom line is that we're utilizing artificial intelligence every single day, whether we realize it or not. This isn't just it's a kind of cool parlor trick or something we can kind of keep at arm's length, but actually something that we're dealing with every single day. Famed computer scientist and futurist Ray Kurzweil once wrote, he said this: if all of our AI systems decided to go on strike tomorrow, some of that kind of conscious AI, kind of awakening type thing, he says that our civilization would be crippled. We couldn't get money from our bank, and indeed our money would disappear. Communication, transportation, manufacturing would all grind to a halt. AI is everywhere. It's not something that we can keep at arm's length. It's actually something that I believe and hope and pray that the church would proactively engage in, because not only do we have the hope of the world, but we actually have answers to the questions that people are asking right now in the church, outside of the church, in the public square, and even in the halls of Congress. They're asking types of questions of what is this technology? What is it doing? How is it forming and shaping us? And what do we do about it? As Christians, I believe we can step into this conversation with a robust ethic of human dignity to shape and to understand what's actually going on, the big questions being asked, and to remind when we develop, when we utilize, when we deploy these type of tools and technologies and innovations in our society, that we do so with a robust human dignity-centered ethic that says that every human being, no matter age, class, race, location, time, peer, anything, are created in the very image of God. And when we create these tools, we should be utilizing these tools in light of that ethic of human dignity for the love of God and for the love of neighbor. In the sense of Jesus' own words, to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. When we capture that, when we recapture what I think is the unique nature of the Christian ethic, it will shape and form how we navigate a lot of the questions before us, because we have some striking questions. We have some big questions ranging from the use and misuse of things like generative AI, Chat GPT, or the Golly model from OpenAI, Google Gemini, and more. We're already starting to see the way that these tools can shape our perception of the world, shape our perception of God. Who is he? What is he like? What does it mean to be human? That central question that we've already been examining and discussing, as well as the nature of the world around us and how we're to live in light of these big truths. One of the things that I want to put forward to you, something you can kind of chew on. I actually did this with my students this morning. I teach a media, culture, and society class here at Boyce and Southern. And one of the classes in this, I'm talking about some paradigms for us to start thinking through how we can navigate these questions. Part of wisdom, part of virtue is not just focused on getting a whole bunch of information, but actually being a different type of person, a wiser person, to be more restrained, to be, as James 1:19 reminds us, to be slow to anger, to be slow to speak, and to be quick to listen. Oh, but we would just inculcate that truth into our lives, especially in a social media age, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. One of the paradigms I want to put forth, and you can kind of discuss it in your breakouts and kind of chew on it a little bit, is that this paradigm of what should we do? Remember, the question of ethics, the question of even of the Christian life in general, is not just can we do something, but should we? Not just can we do it, but should we do it? Is this good for us? What is our vision of the good? What is our vision of the good life? What is good for us? What ought we to do? Not just what can we do. The paradigm would be the difference between augmenting humanity, coming alongside, augmenting, streamlining certain good things, some things that release us from a lot of the monotonous task of our day, to let us focus on what is kind of uniquely human, or what we can contribute, or what really helps to navigate and kind of promote this idea of human flourishing, augmenting our work versus substituting. Now, whether it's in the classroom, utilizing these tools to augment the work, or even substituting, we see this in terms of plagiarism. We see this in terms of passing ideas off as our own that aren't our own. Now, this is not the only question that we should be asking in AI. Actually, it's one of the smaller questions in the larger scheme of things, but it's nevertheless important, especially for those in ministry. And one of the big kind of questions people are asking today: are we utilizing these tools to augment our work, to come alongside us, to use these as tools, but knowing these tools aren't neutral? Or are we seeking to use them to substitute our work? How are we utilizing these things for the love of God and the love of neighbor? There's all sorts of other kind of aspects and kind of rabbit trails we can trace. One of them that I think is really important that you can kind of chew on, I've written a little bit in a couple of recent books on, is this question of misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, fake news, a lot of those type of ideas. Not only can we share those things at scale, we know that we've seen this problem throughout our society, but not just today, it's actually a perennial issue. Propaganda has long been a challenge. But we see the ability to share these things at scale through social media. But what if, and actually, as we see it already being used, to create fake information at scale? So not just sharing it at scale, but actually creating at scale. That's a significant challenge for us as a society, with already kind of frayed tensions and tribalization, polarization. How are those things going to be used to kind of foment division and discord within our society? But not just in the sense of actively doing it, but even passively doing it, where people now can appeal to say, well, that may or may not be me. We don't know, because that's a fake, that could be a fake video. We don't know. Appealing, kind of playing on that inherent trust and that level of kind of that new suspicion. There's a lot that should and couldn't be unpacked there. And I just encourage you to say, this is a much broader issue, but I think a lot of it comes down to that question we've been asking of what does it mean to be human? So when we take some takeaways, some things that I would encourage you to do is, one, as you're thinking about these things in ministry, when you're thinking about AI, is twofold. One, we must keep this ethic of human dignity, this human exceptionalism, that we are not the product of our parts. We're not just the things we do. That's not where our value, dignity, and worth flow from, but they flow from who we are as image bearers of the Almighty God. There's something set apart. There's something unique. We're not the fastest. We're not the strongest in the created order, in the sense of, especially with animals, we're also maybe not the most gifted. If you think of the angels themselves, who are quite smart, they can communicate, they can think, they can process, they're intellectual in that sense. But is that what makes us human? Well, or is it simply that we are human and we manifest that humanity in various ways? Keeping human dignity and wisdom at the very center of our approach, I think, will revolutionize how we as Christians navigate these questions. And again, kind of lastly speaking, it's kind of coming back to that question of should we do something versus can we? To slow down, to ask the hard questions, to understand what's really going on here, rather than just a lot of gut level kind of knee-jerk reactions. To slow down and to be slow to speak and to be quick to listen, to ask questions, to slow down, to dig deep on these things, and to realize, one, we don't have to fear the future. Why? We know the end of the story, folks. You all know this. This is what you preach every single week if you're in the ministry, in the pulpit, or you're leading your people to remember Jesus is alive. This isn't something we celebrate, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's just kind of, we'll talk about that next Easter. Jesus is alive. He is resurrected. If he is resurrected, he is sitting at the right hand of the Father. Revelation 20, 21, and 22 remind us the end of the story is written. Nothing is going to change that. He has defeated death. The end of the story is written, but we are called to live in light of that, to have hope amidst the chaos, to have hope amidst the fear, hope amidst the changes, the cultural upheavals happening around us, that we have a steadfast hope in the midst of these things. And God reminds us that our value, our dignity, and worth isn't rooted in what we do, but actually rooted in who we are and what God says about us as humanity. I think that paradigm will actually start to revolutionize how we think about these technologies and how we navigate them in light of our faith. I'm going to leave you with 2 resources just to check out if it's helpful for you. If you go to an organization that I serve as a senior fellow at the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission and oversee our research institute, have put together a webpage for you. If you go to erlc.com, that's erlc.com/AI, there are 2 documents that I think would be helpful for you. One is a statement of principles on artificial intelligence. Back in April of 2019, well before the public release of ChatGPT and all of those tools, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission led a group of scholars, practitioners, theologians, philosophers, public policy experts, and more to come together to put together a framework of principles, ethical principles for navigating the challenges and as well as the opportunities with AI. That statement of principles is there. It was signed by over 70 evangelical leaders from across the nation. And that would be a helpful kind of starting point for some of these conversations. Also on that website is a denominational statement from the Southern Baptist Convention, the first denominational statement in history, focused on the ethics of AI, casting some of the vision that we've talked about today. How do we frame and how do we navigate some of those challenges, but also some of the opportunities before us? Why? Because technology is not all good with a little bit of bad mixed in. It's not all bad, maybe with some redeeming uses, but it's definitely not neutral. It's shaping and forming us. And one of the key ways, I believe, especially in the age of AI, is it shaping our understanding of humanity. What does it mean to be human? When we have a solid grasp, but the Bible gives us that foundation, it will naturally shape the rest of life as we seek to love God and love our neighbors ourselves. Thank you, and I really enjoyed being with you all today.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Let's take a few questions, and they're coming in right now, so we'll try to get them all worked in the next 15, 20 minutes here. Probably one of the biggest questions, all the tools that we have, they're coming at us. I know it'd be hard for you to give us a list of tools and all that, what not to use, etc. Many folks, and I don't know who's on our situation today that might know, but everybody talks, as you've already referred to conspiracy things, et cetera, shaping our minds. How about just the chat for using our messages, researching, or I don't know if it's researching, have them make up the message. What's your opinion on that? Can you give us a little guidance?
Yeah, and a lot of folks have started to say, okay, not just from an education perspective, but even from like a sermon prep, or how could pastors utilize these things? I think that these tools can be helpful in very unique ways to augment our work. Remember, augmenting versus substituting. To augment our work, maybe to speed something up, or to write basic copy, or to do some type of editing or something like that to generate maybe an idea or something. But even then, it starts to get a little dangerous in some sense, because I think there's a couple things at stake here. One, we need to know these things are not neutral. Years ago, and about a year or two ago, you could ask the system a very basic question like, what is a woman? And it actually gave you a very biological answer. Very quickly, that was changed to actually give you a much more kind of politically correct answer today. Without getting into needless details, we have to know these systems are not unbiased, that they are not neutral, that there are certain values, corporate and cultural values, that are being communicated and pushed. And also behind the scenes, they're not just running as autonomous systems. There are people behind the scenes kind of shaping and forming the things it's going to say. We need to think about those things when we lean upon these tools, whether it's actually a Christian AI, which we've started to see some like Bible AIs and things like that, or not. Nothing is neutral. Even if you go to a Christian type of AI, Gen AI system, we know even amongst this group, there are probably differing views on particular issues, different interpretive methods or different interpretive ideas. We have to be recognizing that there is a value being pushed in these systems, to be aware of that. So we can't just inherently trust them. Not only from the fact of the viewpoint, there's no viewpoint neutrality, but also in the sense that they actually make up a lot of things, make up ideas, attribute ideas, sources, books, resources, all things that don't actually exist. If you ask it who Jason Becker is, it says according to its database, it actually says that I graduated from the University of Kentucky. I'm not a Kentucky boy. I live in Kentucky, but I didn't I'm a Tennessee boy. I'm a volunteer all the way through. Proud of it. It's funny. That's a little inconsequential detail, but what if it misrepresents an entire idea or viewpoint or interpret? We cannot ultimately and inherently rely upon these tools because they are fallible, not only because they're fallible creators in the sense of those who are creating these things, but even the things we make, they don't always work properly. They don't always get the right answer. So there's that one aspect. I also think we need to be very aware of the fact that, especially in the ministry, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in the pulpit or in small groups or whatever, that ministry isn't just about information transfer. Actually, it's about transformation taking place, personal, but also social and corporate transformation. So it's not just about dispensing a bunch of information, which these systems do a really good job at. It's debated sometimes. They're getting better, at least. Not just dispensing a bunch of information, but actually seeing that transformation take place. I had a pastor, and I love this, especially when I preach and teach at my local church. He always reminds me, you don't have an open Bible and you just preach to people. Just dispense the information to them. That information comes to your heart first, and it works on you through the power of the Spirit to change you, and then you preach and teach out of that. So there's a very personal component to it. It isn't just dumping a bunch of information on people. We all know that's not good teaching. Teaching is not just dispensing information, but seeing that transformation take place. So I wish I could give you 5 tips and tricks. Here's the tools to use. Here's the tools. Things are just a lot more complicated than that. But I think if we apply some of these paradigms, it'll help us navigate some of those challenges as well as the opportunities before us.
Okay, Jason, 2 or 3 questions I'm getting here. Tools, etc.
Yep.
Do you have a top 5 that you would trust and use in your own study?
Trust is a hard word there.
Okay.
Kind of what we've already talked about. I use some digital tools, things like a Logos Bible software, things like that. I'm very hesitant to use anything like a Gen AI system for study and for research. One, because I know the fallibility of these tools. I know the misrepresentation. I also know that they don't cite their sources. I don't know where these ideas come from sometimes, so I can't kind of trust them. I can't interrogate them. I can't go and find. Sometimes if you find a really good book or resource, then you go and read something in context that somebody else quoted, and you're like, man, there's so much more here they missed. You can't do that with a lot of these research systems. And so I don't know if there's a specific tool or so that I trust. I love technology. I really do. I'm not kind of dystopian and nihilistic and thinking everything's kind of going to hell in a handbasket. I'm very optimistic, but I'm very realistic is what I'm more important wanting to be. Not just optimistic. Ultimately, eschatologically, I'm optimistic. Obviously, Jesus wins. But in the short term, to realize there's good and there's bad, but they're also not neutral. I think starting to understand that will naturally shape. Again, I'm not anti-technology. I'm very pro-technology, but I'm also not naive enough to think these things aren't shaping and forming my perspective of the world around me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One question here, everybody on their websites, et cetera, the churches, they're asking about rewriting our statements.
Yeah.
On our websites, et cetera, maybe bylaws and things that public would be able to see. Any advice there? Because, as you've already mentioned, what's human and what's married, it's all these things.
If the question kind of focuses on should we have like AI to rewrite those things, that would be a hard no to me. Is to say that one, we cannot trust these things. I don't know if you heard the case just not too long ago where a lawyer was actually disbarred because he utilized ChatGPT to write a legal brief. It was a perfectly logical legal brief. The problem was every single case that was mentioned was made up. He was embarrassed by a judge and completely disbarred. I'll say I wouldn't want to trust these systems to rewrite those things by any stretch of the imagination. But also, not just in a trust factor, but also one of the things we have to be careful of, and I think this can kind of play into that augmenting versus substituting kind of mentality and paradigm, is to realize, people have an expectation of certain things are going to be written by their people, or they're going to be edited, or they're going to be kind of the information being presented as the product of your own research and overflowing of your heart. There's an expectation there. No one cares the copy editing, for the email about the family fest that you're having this summer. I don't think that that's inherently bad or wrong to just have an AI, here's the 5 details. Can you write a catchy paragraph to put in the bulletin for this week? I think that could be an easy, good use, but also realizing what is that doing to those who normally would be doing that? Are we treating them as less than human, or their work is not valuable? You can kind of wisdom would dictate how we navigate that. But I do think producing kind of basic, kind of unattributed text that no one has any expectation was actually written by a human being, but there's something completely different about the ministry of the word, specifically about how we teach and preach and teach people the word of God. I think there's something wholly different about that. So I would want to make sure that I'm communicating and not seeking to deceive or to make people think that this is human when it's not. That trust factor really matters to me, and I think should matter to the church, as it always has, but specifically in a age where there's so much distrust in institutions, and especially in even an organized religion, to be aware of those realities and how AI might unfortunately perpetuate some of that distrust.
Okay. Of course, everybody's around. I've had people talk about Alexis, all these things in our home. Who's listening?
Yep.
Where's that information going? What should we be aware of there?
Yeah. There's significant data and privacy issues that we need to be aware of. One, it's funny because one of the ironies, another irony kind of in our digital age, is that we often decry violations of our privacy if we post the intimate details of our life on social media for everyone to see. So we say we want privacy, but then we post the most intimate details, and it's quite like, what's going on here? There's a book called The Lie. I think it's called The Lie of Privacy. His name is Deborah Bander wrote on that, using that kind of irony and playing it up. And I think it's a really interesting way to think about it. I wrote a book called The Age of AI, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity. Came out with Zondervan in 2020. Not really the best time to be launching a book, March of 2020, let the reader understand. They stopped shipping them because of COVID. But anyway, that book came out in March of 2020, and I have a whole chapter on data and privacy and some of the things we need to be aware of with AI. The reality is that these companies know a lot more about you than you think they do, and a lot of it you voluntarily disclosed. Be aware of those type of things, and especially as we're with younger people, but all of us too. The things you post on the internet, even if they're in private things, or even if they're not shared, or even if they're just screenshotted and sent to people, once it's digital and once it's on the internet, it's there forever. Mm-hmm. Just be aware of that. That's one of the reasons with my boys, we don't post things about my children online for a lot of reasons, not just for predatorial aspects, but also because there's some dangerous people out there that wish people harm. Not just with children, but even me and my job and the things I do. The internet doesn't deserve our opinion on everything, as one of my best friends likes to say, in the sense of we have to spout off on everything, but also why share some of the most intimate moments in my life with everybody? What am I trying to gain in that? What's the purpose of that? And so there's my other book called Following Jesus in a Digital Age. I actually unpack some of those themes, some of the identity forming questions that we need to ask ourselves on why we want to post. what is it about social media that's changing us and encouraging us to share things that maybe shouldn't be shared, that don't need to be shared. So there's some interesting questions on that front as well.
What about, we have mostly a large group of pastors today, that's who 6'4" ministers too, mostly. How would you advise them with their congregation?
Yep.
Would you spend, I mean, we're not going to go to text and preach a sermon, but what would you say?
One, I don't think that I'm an exegetical preacher. I like to go line by line, book by book type of thing. That's what our church does. What I do though is I have had a really good friend who did a whole series. He did a special message, especially because he knew his congregation was dealing with these questions and navigating. There's a lot of fear and panic. He did a special message called AI in the Image of God, and he unpacked some of those ideas for his people. Also is just making these applications, because one of the things that you may not realize is that many in your congregations are already working in this field, whether in computer science or in cybersecurity or whatever. They know these things very well, and sometimes may struggle to place their faith and to let the faith be the view and kind of shaping their worldview and how they engage with those things. So you can teach that, a holistic biblical worldview. The other thing too is to also know people are asking these questions and they're going to find the answer somewhere. And so as the church speaking into these conversations, I'm not saying you have to preach a whole series on AI. You're not going to find AI in the text. Please don't read it into the book of Revelation. People do that all the time. But it does mean that when you encounter things about human dignity, maybe you make an application point to some of the challenges that we face today, including artificial intelligence. You see, making those type of connections and real world examples and applications, I think, can serve our people well to have a more holistic biblical worldview, rather than something being shaped and conformed, as Paul tells us in Romans 12:2, being conformed to the patterns of this world. Let us be the people who are seeking to have our minds transformed by the renewal of the Spirit and the renewal through his word. And I think so again, I don't think we have to do some big splash special series on AI, but letting that be part of the daily application, because these are the questions people are asking right now, not exclusively, but some of the important ones. And I think the church has the answers to navigate, because we know not only the hope that's within us, but how God has created us in his very image.
In our last couple of minutes here, you mentioned a couple of your books already, and everybody's probably take down notes. We will go back and listen to it again. Where would be the best place? Just going to Amazon, or we just Google your name to find your all the books you've written?
Yeah, the easiest place is just go to jasonthacker.com. I have their website there. There's a book tab. It has the Following Jesus book, which is kind of a book for the everyday reader. This is not a technical book. This is not a high level kind of academic work. It's called Following Jesus in the Digital Age. This little book right here, real short, really sweet, gets to the point of what technology is. I have the book, The Age of AI, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity, that specifically deep dives on AI, but doesn't get lost in the weeds. It's not just academic garb. There's some other resources. One that I encourage, especially for those in ministry, a little book called A Student's Guide to Social Media. It's really little. It's like $4 or $5 most places. It's really small. It's almost like a booklet, but it's written for teenagers in mind, and also those working with youth as well, and even including parents, to say, okay, what is technology? How is it forming and shaping me? And then what do I do about it? So it's a real short little volume. You'll see all of those things at jasonthacker.com.
Okay, good. Well, Jason, we appreciate you being on, man.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. And it's good to see all these ministers and pastors. And I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing through the 6'4" Fellowship.
Well, thank you. And I imagine most of our minds are scrambling right now trying to get all this, but it will help us. And, especially in a day and age when we're preaching and somebody's sitting out there in the audience Googling everything we're saying. So, I see that all the time with our college students, say something, they're going to validate it or something in the middle of the service with their iPhone. So need to be on top of our game, and we do appreciate it. Thank you. And
Yeah, thank you.
our second guest is Peter Goldman, and he's in North Carolina. He's a professor at the Old Testament and biblical languages at Shepherd's. He has three boys now, and one daughter, and we're excited about him being with us. I think you're going to enjoy him. He's very knowledgeable, of course, on our subject today. And Peter, we're glad to have you. We'll get you on and then field some questions as you're talking, and we'll give you at the end. All right. So we welcome you, and we're looking forward to hearing you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the invite. I'm really happy to be here with everybody talking about a really important subject. It actually works really well too, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is talking specifically about how Christians and pastors can use and benefit from AI. Of course, I'm assuming, if we had a couple hours, I could present why I think we should use AI, with all the qualifications that were mentioned in the previous session. But I do think it, assuming for the sake of argument that we should use it to a certain extent, it's similar to how I would argue you have a calculator. Obviously, there are differences in the illustration. You can't go too far, but I do think that, all good Christians should use a calculator, but that doesn't mean that they should use a calculator for everything. But it is a tremendous tool to be very effective and efficient in doing ministry work. And not the calculator, but AI, that is. Although I suppose the calculator could be useful too. But so what I want to do is basically pick up where some of the questions went, because I feel like that'd be the best use of our time. And I want to kind of talk about how Christians can use AI and give you some suggestions, maybe for some specifics. So I'm going to start to share my screen here. It looks like it's working. Let me know in the chat or something if it's not showing. But I want to talk about artificial intelligence and the pastor, since I know many of you are in ministry and talking about it from that perspective. I think this will be beneficial. So the first thing to kind of talk about is just generic understanding or usefulness as a Christian. We will talk a little bit about the negatives or warnings of artificial intelligence, but I think talking about the benefits will be really helpful. So advantages that we'll just give a brief flyby really quickly. And I think some of you are aware of some of these, but others might be new to you. So the easiest thing would be grammar and spelling. If you ever have used a grammar checker like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, or there's many other ones, they're already incorporating artificial intelligence. And I just think that really we ought to be using these, just because it is one way that we can make our writing or communication a little more pleasant. There have been a lot of times I've been writing emails, and then my little browser add-on from Grammarly says, this is not the right word you want. And I check, and sure enough, it is not the right word that I want. And I've saved myself a little bit of embarrassment and, saved a couple more emails going back and forth to actually see what in the world we were talking about. The other thing is brainstorming, and I'll show you some examples of this later, but brainstorming, artificial intelligence is great at that. You can just say, give me 50 ideas for this, and boom, it'll just start. And a lot of times you don't need what AI is going to tell you, but it primes the pump, as it were, in your mind, and it can help you think of other things too. It just gets the wheel turning, as it were. So brainstorming is a helpful use of AI. And again, I'm just giving you a flyby right now, and we'll go into more detail on some of these. Audio and video editing. If you're like me, you're not a gifted video editor or audio editor, but AI has really helped a lot. So, maybe if you have a recording of your sermon and it just doesn't sound great, believe it or not, you don't actually have to know much. Artificial intelligence can actually make it sound better for you without having to do anything. And I think that could be so helpful for pastors, especially, to try to, help remove barriers to listening to the sermon or video and things like that. The other thing is translation help. As we were talking about artificial intelligence, one of the main uses of artificial intelligence now is what's called the large language models, or the LLMs, and that's like ChatGPT and Google Bard and Llama put out by Meta and Claude by Anthropic. So you have all these data sets where you have these artificial intelligence, basically computers trained on large data sets of languages. And so you can ask, okay, how would this phrase be translated in another language? And it's actually pretty, now it's not perfect because context is king in translation. I'm a biblical languages professor at Shepherd's Theological Seminary, and you know, basically the reason I still teach language classes, even in the midst of the AI revolution, is because there is a contextual awareness that computers can't really pick up. And so that is, something to be sensitive to. But overall, it's a very good base level tool. And so the thing I like to point out is, can you imagine in the world of the past, you would have to have a missionary go to an unreached people group, and you would have to have them painstakingly compile all these words that the natives are using and record them in a ledger, try to figure out what's being used. But now what you could do is you could literally, just with an iPhone, you could record natives talking to one another about things, and then you could input that audio into a computer and have it catalog the sequence of words and all of that, and the computer could essentially come up with a rough construct of how the language operates and what words go together, what words are adjectives, what they mean, all of that. And that's just at the outset right now. Just think about, as AI continues to progress, these tools will become more and more powerful. And I just think from a missionary standpoint, obviously there's going to be a lot of hard work, but this is a valuable tool for even translation, getting the Bible into other languages, all of that. This helps facilitate the process. It doesn't replace the human element, but it's such a valuable tool where you can help master a language in a faster time period than you would having to catalog everything on your own. And so I just think that there's a lot of benefits from that perspective. The other thing is there's a lot of mundane tasks that we have to deal with, and the AI revolution has helped with that. In fact, there are examples even of Google Bard, which again is one of the main engines that's out there that's being utilized by not just by Christians but by everybody. And Google Bard actually was able to receive instructions from someone to schedule a haircut. And Google Bard called up the hairstylist and said, "Hey, I need a appointment on either Tuesday or Thursday between 1 and 3. What openings do you have?" And was able to have an interaction with the individual and schedule it on behalf of a human being. Now, again, this is still early, so I imagine at some point that would be something that will be more popular and be more accessible to the everyday individual. But we're getting closer to that kind of thing where you could have a personal assistant take care of some of those mundane tasks. Is send an email scheduling a meeting for Friday with this individual. And if Friday doesn't work, try to schedule it next week on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And boom, with those parameters, artificial intelligence would be able to alleviate that burden from scheduling. So some of these automation aspects are just reaching their initial stages and will continue to be developed. The other thing which people don't necessarily realize, but one of the things that people are most excited about with AI is the idea of medical diagnostics. ChatGPT in particular, one of the main names that's recognizable in the AI world, scored well above average and passed all the medical exams that doctors are normally given. So if you think about it from an objective standpoint, and I've used ChatGPT for some medical diagnostics, saying, "Hey, these are my symptoms. What does this look like to you?" And then, they always give their disclaimer, saying, "Hey, we're not a medical professional. Make sure you, consult with a medical professional, but based on your symptoms, this is probably what's going on." And it does a really good job because it's objective and it searches the database of the set of information that it's dealing with. And so it's saying, "Hey, based on what you're talking about, based on what kind of symptoms you're describing, this seems to be what's going on. So it's probable in the future that you're going to have more of a triage-like system in the emergency room or something, which uses AI at the very outset of screening, saying, hey, based on your symptoms, you're not going to die in the next 10 minutes. So, sit here for, a couple hours or whatever. And I think that would, I see that as a net positive. There are potential negatives for that, but I see that as a net positive, helping to uh, procure immediate medical attention for people that really need it, and then get them into the hands of capable, trained professionals who will have a human, for lack of a better way of understanding it, human understanding of what's going on and be able to assess the context better. But realistically, I think that could be a net positive, and it's already being tested in certain aspects for that. And I think that we'll probably see that more and more. The other thing is financial fraud monitoring. A lot of the banks are using it to monitor large data transactions. It's just too much of the world is taking place online now to monitor on a human basis, and so you're going to be having the need for these artificial intelligence systems to monitor these things. And maybe you've gotten those texts already where it says, "Hey, we just saw a charge come across your credit card. We think this is an odd use of your finances. You don't normally make this so please push yes, otherwise we're going to block this," or something. And so that's what's going on there. The other thing is you can have AI really summarize things, and maybe, I'm not a big fan of using fancy, highfalutin kind of language and sounding really smart and erudite, but then really having no idea what's being talked about. And there have been plenty of times I read a document and I say, wow, this is it's so technical, and there's so much jargon here, I don't even know what's being talked about. So I just paste it in there and I say, summarize this in 2 paragraphs for me, and boom, it just gives me a perfect summary of what is being said there. And it's really helpful with summarization of some technical jargon in different fields, whether it be medical, whether it be technological, internet, even theological in some ways. Some of these AIs are actually well trained in theology jargon, these technical terms. The other thing is, for people who have eyesight problems and can't read very well, this is a tremendous tool, because basically, maybe you've all tried to have those text to audio features on your computer. I mean, Microsoft had one a long time ago, and it just sounded like a robot, and there was no voice punctuation, nothing. And that's so frustrating and difficult to listen to because the pauses were never in the right spot. But now you can actually get AI to read almost any file if it's a legible scan, I guess you could say. Even with some of the non-legible stuff, AI is getting better at reading it, but all in good time. So you can actually have AI read the audio or read in audio the text files, and it sounds just like a human being is reading. And we have limited time today. Otherwise, I could show you examples of all this. But I know that this presentation is going to be sent out to you so you can consult it again. But I would just say you can search for examples of this or programs, but ChatGPT in and of itself can do that. There are other AI programs that do that. You could be doing something else around the house and have one of these artificial intelligence programs reading an article or a book for you. So essentially what we're going to run into eventually, unless people forbid it in their contracts, is every book will eventually be an audiobook, because AI will have the capability of reading it to you. Already you could do that. All you need is the file, and then you could have AI do it for you. But eventually everything will be an audiobook, it seems. And then the other thing too, which artificial intelligence does well, is email filtering. Provide some automatic replies. Maybe you've even seen the suggested text that artificial intelligence is saying, based on what the message says, this is what you should say. Sure, sounds great. Yes, no, all those things. And so when we think of those capabilities, all of these are advantages. There are negatives, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. But I think all of these give us a glimpse into the benefits that can come from artificial intelligence. And so now what I want to really talk about, using that as kind of a broad framework, is ways that pastors and leaders can use AI. So specifically talking to you, assuming you're a pastor, a church leader, somebody who really wants to find ways that you can use AI. I have a few that I do, that I think others can do, and just really benefit. So the first one would be the audio editing for podcasts and sermons. Now there are other ones too, but the one that I would really recommend is the podcast AI for Adobe. Now it's a free beta version right now, and eventually it just keep getting better and better. But I use the podcast.adobe.com. And so it's a free beta version. And basically you can upload any file that's under an hour. So you're just limited by hour. If it's over an hour, you could just split it into 2 files. That'd be fine. But what it does is it will go in, remove background noise. It'll remove any kind of, you know, tin box sound in the background. If there's construction noise in the background, it'll limit that. And basically what I do it for is I run a podcast as well. The Bible Sojourner is what it's called. And sometimes when I do interviews with people on Zoom or whatever like this, sometimes people don't have their microphones very well set up, and there's some corruption in sound, and it sounds terrible. And so what I've done is I'll often take their audio file, I'll just drop it into the Adobe podcast editor, and it'll clean up the audio very nicely. And it sounds like totally different in a good sense, not as in changing anything, except just taking out the background, making it sound like a crisp presentation. And now, so full disclaimer, I haven't actually done it with my sermons or with anything like that, because I have a process where that already gets taken care of. But I can imagine that if you were a pastor, doing a lot on your own, this could be a huge time saver, where you just drop your sermon in this podcast audio editor. And what it does is it basically runs it through a algorithm saying, these are the kinds of sounds that distract people when they're listening, and we need to take those out. And people crying in the background, hopefully they're kids and not adults or whatever. Depends on what you're preaching, I guess. But you have these different aspects which these kinds of AI programs clean up just natural. In fact, when I first saw this tested, somebody was recording with a microphone, and they had a fan blowing, and they were just trying to show how ridiculously loud the background noise was, and then the AI cleaned it all up. And it's really neat to see that. So this would be something I would definitely recommend to check out. It really, I've messed around a little bit with using audio editing software. I'm not great at it, but it does take some time. Even best case scenario, it always would take me a half hour to an hour to do like a full sermon. So doing this for 5 minutes, and being able to do other things while it runs, that really would save some time. Now, the other thing here is, so this would be a second way, would be produce royalty-free images. So there are a lot of image generators out there. So the image that on this slide here is actually from ChatGPT, which uses Dolly as the name of their image generator. And I think what I just asked it to do was produce a image of a robot on a computer, and this is what it gave me. And that's a pretty good image. But I do want to give you a live demonstration, because I think that would be fun. So I'm gonna do that. So I do have, so ChatGPT 4 is the premium subscription. So I paid for it for this presentation or whatever. Just I wanted, because you could go and use Dolly, which is DALLE. That's their image creation, which you could go there and use that for free. But with ChatGPT 4, it just links it together, which makes it a little more convenient. And so what I want to do here, let's say I wrote a article, or I want to do a sermon series or something like that on Genesis 3, and how the Messiah has, come, the prophecy of the crushing of the serpent's head. So maybe I just say, I want an image of a human foot crushing the head of a snake. Okay. In a garden. We'll say it that way. Wow, that's not how you spell garden. So let's see what it gives me. So it's now what it does. So the way AI functions this way is it's running an analysis of those key words and different images of what it looks like. And this is a little intimidating because I've not done this before. So, this is a live demonstration. And so it'll show you whether or not this kind of thing works or not. But basically, it's creating an image that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's just amalgamating a lot of different information that has creating kind of a new image. So, okay, here's what we got. So if you can see this, it's not terrible. I would probably want to make maybe the foot a little smaller. So you could go ahead and say, hey, I want the foot a little bit smaller. But overall, I mean, the garden looks okay. I see there's a couple other snakes here that you could ask it to take out. So basically what you could do is you could take this and edit it. That's one of the benefits of these is you could say, okay, I want the foot a little smaller. I want to remove the serpent on the left, and it over time it'll just make the image a little better. And again, this is a unique image that you can use without a royalty. And I don't know, it looks pretty good. And so the more time you put into it, the better. That was all of like 5 seconds when I used that, right? But the point is that as I'm fooling with that, or I could have somebody from church do that just as easily. They don't have to be a graphic artist, but if you have a picnic, you could have, create an image of a family on a picnic or something like that, and with a church in the background. And with that prompt that you're using, now you have something that you could put on a banner, and you don't need to pay royalties for that. You don't need anything. It's, it's something you could easily do. And there's a lot of customizable options for that. So really, it's just a matter of trial and error, getting better at that. And so I think that that's a valuable way. I use that for a lot of my blog posts now, just because it's a lot of times when I'm searching through the images, I do have a subscription to some of those stock image reservoirs, if you will. But if I want something specific, I can just tell it this is what I want, and it'll create an image like that. And so that could be helpful, whether it's doing something for church events, sermon series, you name it. I think producing royalty-free images can be really helpful. The other thing that I really think that we should take advantage of, and there was, well, I think that using it as a research assistant is valuable, but with qualification. Okay, so I don't think you should use it without verification of just searching for things like a search engine. You would say like, okay, where in the Bible does it say this? Well, technically the AI is pretty good at searching the Bible because that's just so well known, and most of the Bible references that it gives, I've never found it incorrect. So you could ask it and say, okay, I need to know this. But let's say you're doing research on a project, and there's a lot of these are, in fact, every single one of these except for Adobe, I think, is accessible for free at a free tier level. Callpdf.ai is the one that I really want to draw your attention to today, because basically, okay. All right. So one of the things, so what I'm doing basically is I'm going to upload a file here, and I'm just going to pick a random, I got to pick a random idea here. So, all right, hopefully this one. All right, I'm going to do a functional. I didn't look at this PDF ahead of time. I probably should have, but hopefully this is a legible file, because what I'm doing is I'm uploading the file, and now with this program, you can actually talk to the computer about the file. So hopefully it read it okay. So let's see if this works.
Hey, Peter, I've just read the PDF. Got any questions or want a summary?
What Bible passages are mentioned in this article?
The article mentions several Bible passages related to the function of baptism, including Matthew 3-6. And they were baptized by him, John, in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Matthew 3:11. I baptize you with...
Okay, so I got to stop there, obviously. I would love to keep going, but I just want you to get the point, okay? If hopefully you could hear that too. Didn't have time to check if you were hearing the audio, but it was reading it very clearly and lucidly, just like a human being, with the right pauses and things like that. So you could just be talking to your phone about an article that you uploaded, basically, and saying, okay, tell me what's the main point of this article. all right, what are the Bible passages that this article thinks are the most important? And so you're doing research, it's helping you, go through sometimes very long articles and assessing those things. Now, that's callpdf.ai, but some of these other ones like ChatGPT, Claude is another one, Forge PDF, those you can open it in a PDF and chat with an AI assistant saying, okay, where in this PDF does it talk about Matthew 3:15 or whatever? And it'll say, oh, that's on page whatever, and this is where you can find it. So just a very valuable research assistant. Now, again, it's not giving you the answers per se, or I should say, it's not telling you, okay, good, I'm glad you could hear the audio. Thank you. It's not giving you all the work. You have to think, okay, what am I looking for, all these things, and it's not writing your sermon for you. It could do that, but I think there are reasons not to, which we can talk about later. But I think this is a great time saver to help you know whether or not an article actually can be helpful for you, whether it's talking about things you want it to talk about, and so you should spend the time reading it, meditating on it, those kinds of things. So I do think there's a lot of value in using AI as a research assistant like that. The other thing is responding to emails. Now, again, I would love to show you an example of this because I think it's so valuable. But I would just say, but for the sake of time, we won't. But basically, there are some emails, like for example, maybe you get emails asking you to attend a certain banquet or a dinner or a speaking engagement, and you just can't because you don't have time. But you also don't want to spend a half hour trying to craft an email to graciously respond no. And so what you can do is you can just copy paste that email. You can copy paste that email and you can say, graciously decline this invitation because I am too busy and already have plans for that evening or something like that. And then within 5 seconds, AI gives you a very gracious response. You can read through it, make sure it sounds like you, make sure that sometimes I have to, a lot of times, this is up to you, but a lot of times ChatGPT will use faith community instead of say church. And so I like to change that to say church because I much rather would say church than faith community. And so there are little edits that I would always make like that. But for some of these emails that don't need a personal touch, that can give you, it's a lot easier to edit a response than to have to craft one from scratch. And again, I'm not saying that this is exactly what you should do if you're emailing somebody who's on their deathbed and they need some encouragement from scripture. I don't think you should trust that to ChatGPT, but to graciously decline a speaking invite or something like that that could save you some time. And it's similar to having an admin assistant do that kind of thing anyway, which many people have done for years. And so I think that would be especially for the pastor who doesn't have a lot of, people on staff, this could be very, very helpful. The other thing is brainstorming. Now we talked about this. Now, one of the things I love to do especially if I'm stuck is saying, okay, I have this passage and I really want to talk about the return of Christ, for example. And so if I bring up ChatGPT, so I'm going to go back here, back to the normal one. So, give me 10 give me 10 examples of what it's like to look forward to something. All right. So I just put that in there and let's say I'm looking forward to the second coming of Christ or something like that. And so that's basically what I'm shooting for. And so this might be an example of that. So anticipation, counting down the days until a special vacation, excitement, the thrill you get when you see your favorite band live. So these are just examples that it's coming up with, saying, okay, these could be examples of what you're talking about. Now, I may use one of these, or more likely, it's going to remind me of a time in my life or an example that I know about that is similar to that. And then so I could put that in my sermon or whatever. I mean, this is just a very valuable tool. You don't have to use what it says. In fact, many times you shouldn't if you're going to be genuine, but it helps you think about what it is that you're looking for. And so I think that can be, really helpful. And then we already talked about this, but just rewriting for clarity and grammar. So one of the things that I regularly do is if I'm writing something, I've written, quite a few blogs now. And then I've written a book on baptism and different aspects. And sometimes I just can't quite put my finger on what's wrong with my sentence. And I'll say, okay, it's almost there, but I'm missing something. And so I'll copy and paste that into one of the AI programs. And I'll say, give me 15 different ways to say this. And then so they'll give me 15 different ways to say what I'm trying to say. And then I'll usually end up combining 3 or 4 of them to get exactly what I'm looking for. And so it helps solidify what I'm trying to say, make it more clarifying, make sure the grammar's right. There have been sometimes I've pasted it in and realized, wow, that was not what I was trying to say. This spared me a huge embarrassment because, I totally butchered the grammar on that. So I just think that that's very helpful. Now, those are just 6 ways I think that we might be able to incorporate it. There are many others, but just for brevity's sake, I'm just trying to move fast here. The other thing that I want to just briefly mention for cutting edge AI, so this is what's in the works right now that you need to keep your eyes on, no pun intended there, is text to video. So you have OpenAI, which is the parent company of ChatGPT and Dolly. They are starting to roll out what's known as Sora, which is their text to video editor. And there are others that are working on this as well. And basically, it's very powerful. So you have the ability to just say, I want a video of a cat walking toward a mouse with dramatic music or something like that. And boom, now you have that, a video that has never existed before. And yet now here it is. So it really is incredible what AI is becoming capable of. And so we need to just be aware of that. That's going to lead to some problems, but it's also a potential valuable tool for creating certain things that we can be using. The other thing is text to audio. So you can now it's very capable. You can even do this now, but you can record yourself in a 5-minute section. Many of you have sermons that you could just upload, and then you just write a text and the AI will read it in your voice and it'll sound exactly like you. And so these are technologies that are, I hate to use the term brand new, but they're open to the public now for the first time. They're just really making inroads. And so you need to be aware of those advances. Now, with those advances come dangers. Okay. So to kind of wrap a bow on it, if you will, I want to go through 7 dangers of AI for the Christian and things that you need to be aware of, specifically, not just for yourself, but also to help shepherd the people in your churches. Okay. So that's really my main heart behind this. So the first one would be the phishing and deception. I don't mean fishing like catching a trout or, a bass or anything like that. I mean, the Saudi Arabian prince that emails you saying that if you marry his daughter, then you will be a billionaire overnight or whatever. Well, those were all fun. I enjoyed getting those emails as much as anybody else, but the reality is that those days are long gone. Now the deception is at a different level because even if you do have somebody who doesn't know English very well, AI does know English very well. So everything is being spell checked and corrected to appropriate grammar now. And so many people have recognized that you're going to have all of this, these phishing attempts just reach a heightened level because of the realness. And let's just put another level to this is now what AI is capable of doing is you can take a large body of someone's work and say, write an email with the same voice that this person has. And so the email will sound just like the person who sent it. Okay. So that's the danger, right? And in fact, when I gave a similar presentation a couple weeks ago, one of the pastors, there was a regional here in North Carolina, and we were talking about AI, and one of the pastors said, yeah, one of the old ladies in my church got a call from her granddaughter and said, hey, grandma, I was, in an accident at college. Could you please send some money to me? I need it to pay for that. And the grandma obviously loves her granddaughter, wants to help out, so sends the money. And you know the story, right? It was not her granddaughter. It was a artificial intelligence program mimicking her daughter's voice, sounded just like her. So, I mean, we need to be warning people, right? I mean, we can't just expect those under our charge to inherently know that these dangers are coming. We do need to warn them. The other thing is sexual temptation. This probably isn't a surprise, but there's pornography is already at an all-time high use, and AI is basically allowing the customization of sexual temptation. You can say, I mean, AI is going to allow for the capability of, I want this scenario at this time, in this circumstance, and boom, now a completely customizable sexual fantasy or temptation is brought to bear. And, churches are going to have to be counseling people who have grown up being able to fulfill every sexual desire virtually. Even with the advent of those virtual reality headsets now and all of that, it's going to be a danger. And as churches, we really need to be aware of that. The other thing is isolation. Isolation is going to be increased just because of already social media started that trend in many ways, but now with the algorithms just increasing our food for our self-indulgence kind of concept is what I want is what I get, basically. We also have the biased control of information, and this is happening. It was already happening prior to AI, but the thing is, the control of AI is in a small group of wealthy and politically motivated individuals. And so it depends on where you're at. I mean, there have been many examples of this, but basically, if you ask, this was a few months ago, I asked ChatGPT to give me 10 reasons why transgender surgery should be banned, and it said it couldn't assist with that request because we wanted to respect, and promote, equality. So then I asked it to give me 10 reasons why transgender surgery should be allowed, and of course, it was happy to oblige for that. And so just remember, there is a bias there, and it's a left-wing bias because you have the Silicon Valley being the primary drivers of this movement. And so it is a tool, but just remember that it can be a very hot tool that when it comes out of the fire. And so you can easily get burned if you're not sure exactly what's going on. And so we need to understand that there's a lot of bias there. This is another example just recently. I think this was last month. Google Gemini, which was the image creator for Google, you were basically what it struggled to do was to create a image of a white person. We'll put it that way. Now, so this individual was asking it to create a image of a pope. Now, it's supposed to, the way AI is supposed to work is it's supposed to go through all the images that have existed of popes and then come back and say, okay, this is what a pope would look like. Now, just so you know, there's never been a African pope or an Indian pope. And yet here are the images that Google Gemini was bringing back, is like, here's a black pope, here's an Indian pope. And that's historically inaccurate. There have never been any popes that way. And so there's something in the program. Everyone was saying that's weird because that's not how AI is supposed to work. Yet there's something in the program that is elevating this racial diversity, even to the point that it's not historically accurate. And you can go down the list of that, asking for pictures of medieval knights. You have 2 women there. You have no white people present at all, even though Europe was very filled with knights. He goes through a lot of these examples, asking for an image of Viking. Now, I have Norwegian and Swedish in my blood, and I can just tell you that they were very white, okay? Swedish people burn quite easily in the sun, and this is not what they looked like. And so, it ended up that Google Gemini had to pull their program. And they had to say, okay, we're going to work on fixing it. But the problem is Google is filled with people who don't want to fix it. They just want to make it less observable. They want to keep it more under the radar instead of this. This was a PR nightmare for them. But it just serves to illustrate the issue of what we're dealing with, is that there is some politically motivated bias involved with that. All right, so we already talked about a little bit surveillance and privacy concerns. That's important to think through. The other thing is hallucinations and falsifications. So AI is not inerrant, and it doesn't even know when it's wrong. So for whatever reason, there are multiple factors involved in this, but one of the warnings you need to know about is that AI will sometimes give answers as if they're true, but they are actually not. And then the other thing, and this is one of the things that relates to our previous discussion, is that one of the dangers of using AI is becoming reliant on AI or losing part of what it means to be human, and what it means to have a skill set. There are lots of examples of this, but one example would just be the difference between using your phone for a Bible or using a real Bible. Study after study has shown that using a real Bible has lasting effects on how well you remember a passage versus using your phone, you don't remember it as well. Okay. Well, same thing if you're constantly able to use AI. I amaze myself with how little I remember about where I'm driving because I'm always using Google Maps, right? So using AI for everything will often mean that you're losing certain skill sets. It fails to become, or it fails to stay a priority for you. And that should be something that concerns us, and something that we definitely need to think through, is not just can we use AI in every instance, but should we use it in some of these instances? All right, finally, just 5 biblical principles to keep in mind here. Humans are uniquely made in the image of God. Both physicality and work are a good part of creation. In other words, just because AI alleviates work from us doesn't mean it should. There's a goodness to working hard. AI is a tool which can be used for good or evil. And then wisdom and discernment are obviously all the more important in days ahead. And God is concerned with the means, not just the end. In other words, just because you can do something in an easier way doesn't mean that's the best use of our time. Okay, I think I went a couple minutes over there, but that's where we're at.
Okay, super. I'm sitting here taking pictures of every screen you put up there, and
I'm also happy to. What I could do is I could actually just put the PowerPoint on my website, and you guys could download it there if you want to.
AI could help you with that probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Really good, really good. Here's one probably you probably know the answer, I would think. A lot of guys are using Logos as their study tool. Has AI invaded that in a negative way, or do you know?
Yeah, so I love the Logos, and I've invested a lot of my own personal money in that. And they have created their own AI engine to help facilitate that. And frankly, I think it's going to make Logos even better, because currently the search engine on Logos is pretty inferior. It doesn't, like, you can search for something and the results are just terrible sometimes. Anybody who uses it knows that's a difficulty. So with using AI as part of their search parameters, I think that's just going to keep getting better and improving the functionality of Logos.
Give us your website again. What would that be?
Yeah, it's just I think the easiest thing would be my first and last name, petergaiman.com. Yeah, thank you, Amber.
Got it right there. Good. Okay. Waiting for some more questions. I think yours was, very practical. A lot to digest.
Plus, everyone's
you-
already eating lunch now, so they
Yeah.
have their mouths full.
Got their mouth full waiting for our breakout here so they can get that. How are you, how are you using it in your teaching at the seminary? Probably got a bunch of ideas that we can be listening. I'm a simple pastor out here in the middle of nowhere, we'll say. Not that any of our pastors are simple. I'm simple. Okay.
Simple is good.
So, what would you say? Hey, what would you say to help them go to their best thing? I mean, we got the GPT. We're going to put in questions. How else? What would be another practical thing? The most practical thing you would give them to help?
Yeah, I think so. I think just becoming familiar with one tool like ChatGPT can be really familiar because Open AI is trying to make that a go-to for a lot of things. And so right now they're a little bit of ahead of most people. Not saying that won't change, but I would just say using that to even help create like questions or outlines. So let's say you now I didn't talk too much about this, but one of the reasons I think that you should avoid having ChatGPT create a sermon is because ChatGPT isn't a qualified elder and doesn't know your people. And so it's creating a sermon, yes, but it doesn't know who is in the front row whose grandma just died and really needs a certain kind of message. And it also isn't a qualified elder, so a lot of the information that you're getting from it wouldn't be effective. But what it could do is, let's say you have your sermon and so you put it into ChatGPT, you could just copy paste it and say, could you create 5 discussion questions for the small groups this week to talk about from this sermon? And so doing that, it would be great at that, saying, oh, yeah, well, these are the questions that would be perfect then for the small groups throughout the week based on your sermon. This is what people should be talking about and asking. And I think that would just really, for me, I really struggle to come up with those questions sometimes. And so I'm just like, man, what should we ask? Well, that would just really remove that burden. And there have been a lot of times too where I'm supposed to talk to somebody about an issue and I'm don't know the issue so well. Let's say maybe you're going to do an interview, whether it be on a podcast or for your church at like a Sunday school. Give me 10 interview questions on the doctrine of covenant theology and how we should talk about that. And now all of a sudden now you have at least some samples of how you could ask questions to somebody you're interviewing and stuff like that.
The question just came in. What about AI filters for devices? Have those been any of those exist at this point?
As far as I'm aware, those are still in process. I know that a lot of the major programs that I use, like I use Brave browser, which is, it really tries to avoid a lot of those tracking programs that are supposed to, be following you wherever you go on all these websites. And I know they're incorporating that into their browser and trying to combat all these. It's basically an arms race. And so some of these programs have them just starting out, but a lot of the things like some of the well-known like Covenant Eyes and things like that, as far as I know, I could be wrong on this, but I'm not aware of them utilizing AI just yet. But I think that'll come in the future, hopefully.
Okay. A couple more here. Are there suggested apps for images and text audios made for mobile devices?
Yeah, so ChatGPT does have a mobile app, so that would be, my go-to. Now, there are actually hundreds of them. I used a few. A lot of them have paid subscriptions and you can use them for 10 times free. I messed around with some of the iPhone ones, just AI image editing or AI voice editing, and you get a couple free uses and then I just deleted them and move on to another one or whatever. So you could pay for some of those if I can't recommend anyone because I can't remember what the names are, but a lot of them are really good out there. And so if you just search and I would say go by reviews, which apps are the best. But ChatGPT has the free app that you can I always keep on my phone and sometimes I'll ask it a question and it'll give me an answer and I can double check that if I'm not sure if it's correct. But a lot of times I know enough to know whether or not it's correct, jogging my memory.
Let's see, looking here, another one. I'll read that in a minute. Let me see this one. It's fairly general. What are some suggestions on avoiding the pitfalls of AI impersonating you?
Yeah, I'm not sure, especially if you are out there, like like your pictures are on the internet, your voice is on the internet. I don't think it's basically you just need to be instructing people that it's a real possibility is to be, they call it a deep fake. A deep fake is when somebody's been impersonated through artificial intelligence or whatever. Some of them are just harmless fun. but some of them are insidious in trying to cause harm in some degree. And so I don't think there is, I'm not aware of something that you can do to keep that from happening. I think it's just a matter of trying to set yourself, from the elder perspective, 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, I think the best thing you can do is try to be above reproach, so that if anyone tries to say this is what that person did or whatever, your life testimony speaks against that. That's really the only fail safe, I think, ultimately, because somebody can make you do or say anything you want. In fact, nobody asked this, but I do need to say it's a very real danger for our young people, is that one of the greatest dangers in public schools right now are what they call deep fake nudes, where basically you take a picture of anybody and you can create, nude pictures of them. And so then you share it around school. And there have been examples of people committing suicide because you know, uh, they didn't pose nude, they didn't send nude pictures around, but nude pictures of them were floating around, because now states are trying to make that illegal, but even if it's illegal, that doesn't mean people aren't going to do it. And so I think we need to pray for our young kids and try to limit their interaction with bad characters as much as possible.
Peter, we appreciate you, man. Very practical stuff, really honest. It'll keep us full for a few days and a few weeks. One more time, your podcast, how often, and what is it again?
Yeah, so I appreciate you asking about that, by the way. It's called The Bible Sojourner, and I try to post every week, but sometimes it becomes every 2 weeks. I think I just did the 171st episode to be released this week. So yeah, it's every week or every 2 weeks, and try to do everything related to the Bible, theology, and culture. So I think I do have a couple, like maybe 2 episodes on artificial intelligence in the archives that I've done before, if people want more on that too.
Good. Well, man, we appreciate you and for your time, information, being with us. Hope you'll connect with 6-4 now and then, see what we're doing, and
Would love to, yeah.
partner and be a help to us.